My name is Nina Collins, and I'm 36 years old. 6 months ago, I buried my husband alone. Not metaphorically, literally, alone. While I stood beside his coffin, my parents were clinking champagne glasses at my younger sister Christy's 29th birthday party. That was the day I learned you can be an orphan even with both your parents alive. It started like any other Thursday. Daniel woke before me, humming off key to some forgotten 80s tune as he ground the coffee beans. The smell drifted through the house, dark roast and something faintly sweet. He always said morning coffee was his version of prayer. You can't face the world without faith or caffeine. He was dressed for a client meeting, light gray suit, blue tie, the one I'd given him on our anniversary. Wish me luck, he said, smoothing his hair. If today goes well, we might finally land the Harborview contract. He kissed me twice, once on the forehead, once quickly on the lips. Don't wait up if I'm late, he said, but I'll try to come home early. You pick the show, I'll bring Ty. Those were his last words. At 9:43 a.m., a delivery truck blew a red light at the intersection of Park and 8th. The driver had been awake for 20 hours, hopped up on caffeine and whiskey, his blood alcohol 3 times the legal limit. The police later told me Daniel never had time to react. The impact crushed the driver's side instantly. When the call came, I was in the middle of a conference with a new client, pretending to care about marketing metrics while my phone buzzed again and again. Unknown number, voicemail. Then another call. I silenced it, apologized to the client, and checked my phone. Mrs. Collins, this is Officer Ramirez with the state police. There's been an accident. Please call us back as soon as possible. I don't remember leaving the office. I remember keys, elevator buttons, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I must have driven myself, but I couldn't tell you how. The hospital was a blur of white and noise, people talking softly, doors opening and closing, someone saying my name as if from underwater. They took me to a corridor I'll never forget. Long, sterile, humming with fluorescent lights. At the end, a door with a sign. Morgue. Authorized personnel only. Are you sure you're ready, ma'am? The nurse asked gently. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. There are things I will never describe. The smell, the color of his skin, the way my knees gave out when they lifted the sheet. They say the body is just a shell. Whoever said that never had to look at the person they loved most and see everything that made them human gone. Afterwards, I stumbled outside into the parking lot, clutching paperwork I couldn't read. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unlock my phone. And then instinct kicked in. The same reflex every child has, no matter how old. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Her voice bright, cheerful, loud music in the background. Sweetheart, can I call you later? We're at the restaurant. Christy's about to get her cake. Mom, my voice broke. Mom, something's happened. Daniel's gone. The laughter on the other end stopped. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me right. What do you mean, gone? There was a crash. A truck driver. They said it was instant. I could hear muffled voices behind her. Then my father's voice, steady, irritated, like I'd just interrupted a meeting. Nina, slow down. What's going on? I repeated everything. Every word the officer had told me, the hospital, the morgue. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. When I finished, there was a pause so long I thought the call had dropped. Then my father said calmly, clearly, Nina, today is Christy's birthday. We have the private room booked, the deposit paid, everyone's here. We can't just walk out. For a second, I couldn't even process the words. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, sure I'd misheard. Dad, I'm at the hospital. I just identified his body. I don't know what to do. Please, I need you. You're strong, he said, the same way he always said it. You'll handle it. We'll come by this weekend, all right? Christy would be devastated if we left right now. In the background, I heard my sister's voice, high, annoyed. Is that Nina? Oh my God, tell her not to start her drama on my day. My father lowered his voice as if to reason with me. We can't disappoint your sister, honey. You know how she gets. Dad, I whispered. Daniel is dead. Silence. Then, we'll call you tomorrow. Click. Just like that. The line went dead. So did something inside me. I don't remember crying after that. The tears had burned out somewhere between the morgue and that phone call. I just sat in my car, staring at the hospital doors, trying to breathe. People walked past, living their lives. Nurses, orderlies, a man holding flowers. I thought, how strange. The world still moves. My phone slipped out of my hands and hit the passenger seat. I stared at it, waiting for them to call back. They didn't. That night, I stayed in the empty house, still expecting Daniel to walk through the door. His jacket hung on the hook by the kitchen, his coffee mug still in the sink. Every room smelled like him. Every surface was proof of the life we built together. I tried calling again just to hear my mother's voice. She answered on the third ring this time, quieter. I could still hear faint chatter in the background. Laughter, glasses clinking. Mom, I said, barely breathing. They need me to make funeral arrangements. I don't know how to do this. I need you here. Honey, she said, her voice full of that soft, patient tone she used when I was being difficult. Your father's right. We can't just leave. All her friends are here. The food's been ordered. You don't want to ruin your sister's night, do you? Mom, my husband is dead. Oh, Nina, don't be dramatic. The funeral can wait a few days, can't it? We'll come next week. Next week. As if grief could be penciled into their schedule. At 10:17 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Christy, I almost didn't answer, but I did. Why would you call Mom and Dad during my party? She demanded, her voice sharp with irritation. You completely killed the mood. Mom's crying, Dad's furious, and everyone's asking what's wrong. Christy, I said slowly, my throat raw. Daniel is dead. He was hit by a truck this morning. She exhaled, long and loud, like I'd told her the weather was bad. Oh my God, that's awful. Really. But couldn't you have waited until tomorrow? You know how emotional Mom gets. Are you coming to the funeral? I asked. When is it? Saturday. Oh, I can't. James and I have concert tickets. They were super expensive. The funeral was small. Daniel's employees filled one side of the chapel, men in their work boots, sitting uncomfortably in suits that didn't fit right. The other side, my side, was almost empty. No parents, no sister. Just silence. I stood alone before a single coffin, my hands shaking around a bouquet of white lilies. The pastor spoke about love, about community, about how Daniel touched many lives. But no one from my own family was there to hear it. After the service, I walked outside to find my phone full of notifications. Christy had posted on Instagram, 29 and thriving. Best birthday ever. Grateful family love birthday girl. 12 comments, 67 likes. Not one mention of my husband's name. That night, I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped waiting for their calls. I stopped being the good daughter. Because if they could choose a party over my pain, then I could choose peace over their approval. People say grief changes you. They're right. But being betrayed while you're grieving? That doesn't just change you, it hardens you into something unrecognizable. I stared at the empty chair across from me at the dining table and whispered to the air, "You were right, Daniel. They never really saw me." And for the first time in my life, I started to see myself. Not as their daughter, not as Christy's shadow, but as the woman who would never again beg to be loved by people incapable of love. When people hear what my parents did, they usually ask the same thing. How could they? The truth is, they'd been training for it their entire lives. In our family, love wasn't unconditional. It was earned by being easy, polite, and quiet. I was the responsible one. That was the title my father gave me before I even hit puberty. Nina's the rock, he used to say at every family dinner. She doesn't cause problems like Christy. It sounded like praise. It wasn't. It was a warning. Don't stop being the one who holds everything together. Christy was 7 years younger than me, a walking glitter bomb of chaos. If she got a bad grade, Dad blamed the teacher. If she crashed her bike into the neighbor's car, he blamed the neighbor's driveway. When I got straight A's, he said, "Good. That's what we expect from you." That's how it always was. My success was the baseline. Her disasters were the tragedy. When I was 17, I got a partial scholarship to Northwestern. It wasn't full, but it was enough to make the dream possible. First-generation college student, moving out, finally building a life that didn't revolve around Christy's latest meltdown. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table. Mom had that gentle but firm face she used when she was about to ruin something for my own good. "Sweetheart," she said, "Christy's at a sensitive age. You know how she looks up to you." I nodded, not sure where this was going. "We just think it's better if you stay home for now. You can do community college for the first year. Christy's been feeling abandoned lately." "Abandoned?" I repeated. "By me going to school?" "She's emotional," Mom said. "You know how she gets." Dad folded his arms. "We're not saying no, Nina. We're just saying wait." But wait became, "We spent your college fund on something else." Christy decided to take a gap year after high school to find herself. My parents financed the whole thing. 6 months in Europe, hostels, wellness retreats, yoga on cliffs, champagne on boats. Every Instagram post captioned, "Our soul journey son our family love." The family love part came from my parents sending money every 2 weeks because, as Mom said, we can't have her stranded overseas. When she came home, she had a tan, a tattoo of a wave on her wrist, and $12,000 in debt. She also had a new phrase. "You're so lucky you're stable, Nina. I could never live such a boring life." When Mom had her first knee surgery, guess who moved back home to care for her? Not the free spirit. I took unpaid leave from my job for 3 months. I slept on the couch, managed her meds, cooked every meal, drove to every appointment. Christy came by twice, once to borrow a curling iron, once to introduce a new boyfriend named Tyler who sold organic supplements out of his trunk. When Mom could finally walk again, Christy showed up with flowers. And suddenly, in my parents' version of events, she was the devoted daughter who helped me through it. I didn't correct them. I just smiled. Because in our family, correcting the story meant starting a war you'd never win. Daniel saw it right away. The first time he met them, he brought a bottle of wine and a bouquet for Mom. She looked at the flowers and said, "Oh, I'm allergic to lilies." Christy arrived 20 minutes late, drunk on attention and sangria, and announced she'd just landed a brand partnership for her blog. Dad lit up like she'd won the Nobel Prize. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. We always knew you had the creative spark." Then he turned to me. "See, Nina, you should do something fun for once." After dinner, Daniel and I sat in the car in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, "They've trained you to disappear." I laughed. "They're just traditional." He shook his head. "No, they're parasites. They feed off you because you're safe. Because you don't say no." I didn't want to believe him. But deep down, I already knew he was right. When Daniel proposed, my parents didn't ask how he did it. They asked how much he made. "Construction?" My father repeated, skeptical. "That's risky." "He owns the company," I said. "That's still not stable," Mom added quickly. "But at least he's hardworking. Maybe he'll inspire Christy." At the engagement party, while I was thanking guests, Christy stood on a chair and clinked her glass. "I have an announcement," she said, voice trembling with fake emotion. "I'm pregnant." The room gasped, then erupted in cheers. All eyes turned to her. My engagement became her opening act. Later, I found her in the bathroom crying because her boyfriend had left the party without her. "I didn't mean to steal your thunder," she said between sobs. "I just didn't want to be alone tonight." And like an idiot, I hugged her. Because that's what good daughters do. We make everyone else feel better, even the person who just destroyed our night. The pregnancy didn't last, the sympathy did. For the next year, everything revolved around Christy's healing. Her moods, her therapy bills, her new holistic business venture that somehow required another $10,000 loan from our parents' mortgage. Dad joked about being house poor with a wink, as if losing financial security for his youngest was an act of nobility. When I offered to help with budgeting, he said, "Don't worry about us. Focus on your husband." I did. Daniel and I built something real, his company, our little house, a life grounded in hard work. My parents never once visited. They were too busy helping Christy get back on her feet, which ironically meant buying her a new car. The last time I saw them before Daniel's death was Christmas. Daniel cooked the entire dinner, prime rib, potatoes, chocolate tart. He was proud, grinning, wearing a Santa apron. My parents arrived 2 hours late. Christy came straight from a party, perfume and resentment trailing behind her. She handed me a candle from a discount store, still wrapped in the receipt. Then she gave Mom and Dad matching leather travel bags. "Imported," she said, smiling. "You deserve the best." Mom teared up. "Oh, sweetheart, you're so thoughtful." Daniel and I exchanged glances across the table. He reached for my hand under the cloth and squeezed it gently. Later that night, when everyone had left, he said quietly, "You know they'll never change, right?" "I know," I said. But I didn't really know. Not yet. After Daniel died, people kept telling me, "You'll find out who your real friends are." They didn't warn me I'd also find out who my real family wasn't. In the days after the funeral, my parents didn't call once. No flowers, no visits, nothing. But on the 6th day, my phone rang. Mom. Her tone was light. Too light. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you holding up?" "How do you think, Mom?" She sighed. "Well, I just wanted to check on you. And to see if Daniel left anything behind. You know, insurance or maybe the company." I froze. "Why?" "Well," she said carefully, "you know your father and I have been struggling. Christy's trying to get her life together, but rent is so expensive, and we're not getting any younger." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "I just buried my husband," I said. "And you're already asking me for money?" "Don't be selfish, Nina. Family helps family." "Family shows up when you're burying your husband," I said. "Family doesn't send you a text from a party." She went quiet. Then softly, "You're angry. I understand. Grief makes people say cruel things." She said it like I was the problem, like I'd inconvenienced them with my loss. After we hung up, I sat on the floor for a long time, holding Daniel's sweater to my chest. And I finally understood what he'd meant when he said they were feeding on me. The next day, my father called. "Nina," he said, "your mother's upset. You need to apologize." "For what?" "For the way you spoke to her. We're trying to help you." "By asking for money?" Oh, he sighed as if I were a stubborn child. "Your sister needs support. IVF isn't cheap. You have the resources now. Think of it as an investment in the family legacy." Family legacy? From the man who skipped his son-in-law's funeral for a birthday dinner. "Dad," I said quietly, "the legacy ended the day you didn't show up." He went cold. "You'll regret this," he said. "When you're alone, you'll wish you'd stayed close to your family." "I'm already alone," I said. "Thanks to you." And I hung up. That night, something inside me shifted. Not shattered, solidified, like grief cooling into glass. I made tea, sat at Daniel's desk, opened my laptop, and typed the first words of a new beginning. Collins Foundation. Proposal draft. A fund for families who lose everything because of someone else's choices. If my parents had taught me one thing, well, it was that pity never fixed anything. But consequences? Consequences changed lives. They'd spent years calling me the strong one, the reliable one, the one who'd always be there. They were right about one thing. I'd always be there, just not for them. The morning of the funeral was cold enough to hurt. That kind of gray, brittle cold that makes everything sound distant, like the world is holding its breath. The sky hung low, metallic. The kind of color Daniel used to call contractor gray. He'd laugh and say, "You can't paint over that, it's just the weather having a mood." He'd always had a way of finding warmth in things that didn't deserve it. Now I was standing in that same color, staring at the church doors, wishing the ground would open up and swallow me whole. People were already inside when I arrived. Men in black suits, coworkers from the company, old clients, neighbors I barely knew. They turned when they saw me, that pitying tilt of the head people think is kindness. "Poor thing," their eyes said. "She's so young, so tragic, so alone." The funeral director met me at the entrance with a clipboard and that professional half smile he must have practiced in the mirror. "Mrs. Collins, we've reserved the first 2 rows for family." Family. That word stung like alcohol on an open wound. I nodded and walked down the aisle. The casket was at the front. Mahogany, simple, elegant, exactly what Daniel would have chosen. No gold handles, no gaudy flowers. Just a clean, honest box for a man who'd built his life on clean, honest work. I placed my hand on the smooth wood and whispered, "You deserved better than this." When the music started, I sat in the first pew, alone. Across the aisle, Daniel's employees filled the seats shoulder to shoulder. Tough men, all sunburn and calluses, holding their hats in their laps like schoolboys. Behind them, his parents. Frail, gray, both leaning on canes but still there. Still showing up despite their age and the miles they'd traveled from Oregon. They shouldn't have had to come alone. My parents should have been there to hold them, to hold me. Instead, 3 white name cards sat on the right side of the front pews, reserved for Robert and Linda Walker, reserved for Christy Walker. Those 3 cards stayed untouched for the entire service. The pastor spoke about love, about loss, about how Daniel built homes for others while creating one in the heart of every person he met. I didn't hear most of it. My ears filled with static, my throat closing around air that wouldn't move. All I could see was the empty side of the church. 3 seats like open graves, each one a reminder that even the living can abandon you. When the pastor said, "Would anyone like to say a few words?" I stood. Not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. I walked to the podium, heels echoing on the tile. Every step felt like walking through mud. "I used to think family was forever," I said, voice shaking. "I thought it was the one thing that couldn't break, no matter how hard life got." I glanced at the empty row. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the room, the uncomfortable shuffle of strangers who realized they'd wandered into something too raw. "Daniel once told me," I continued, "that you can tell everything about a person by how they show up when it's inconvenient, when it costs them something, when there's nothing to gain." I took a deep breath. He showed up for everyone, every time. And today, the people who were supposed to show up for him didn't. I didn't cry. I'd already spent all my tears. "I don't know if heaven works on attendance," I said softly. "But if it does, Daniel's already there. The rest of us, we've got a lot to learn." Then I stepped down and sat back in my empty row, staring at those 3 white cards, wondering how something as simple as paper could feel heavier than the coffin itself. After the service, people came up one by one. Awkward hugs, mumbled condolences, casserole promises. Daniel's foreman, Miguel, pressed a small wooden cross into my hand. "He made this for our last safety meeting," he said. "Said every house needs something sacred in it. Maybe now, every house he built does." I nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the cold bit harder. A thin drizzle began, that in-between rain that can't decide whether to fall or freeze. Daniel's parents shuffled up beside me. His mother's voice was soft, trembling. "You did beautifully, dear. He'd be proud." I smiled weakly. You shouldn't have come all this way. She squeezed my hand. He came when we needed him. It's our turn. That simple sentence nearly broke me. Because that's what love is. Showing up when it hurts. And my own blood couldn't manage it. That night, when I got home, the house was too quiet. I left the lights off and sat on the floor beside the couch, still in my black dress. Daniel's jacket hung on the chair, his phone charger still plugged in. The cup of coffee he'd left half-finished that morning, still sitting on the counter. The silence pressed down until I couldn't breathe. And then my phone buzzed. Mom. For a split second, I thought maybe she'd realized what she'd done. Maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she'd apologize. I swiped to answer. Hi, sweetheart. She began brightly, like nothing had happened. Just checking in. How was the service? I swallowed hard. It was beautiful, I said. You would have known that if you'd been there. Oh, Nina, she sighed. Don't be cruel. You know we had Christy's party planned for months. And with her stress lately, we couldn't disappoint her. Her stress? I echoed. I just buried my husband. Well, she said carefully, you're young. You'll rebuild, but your sister's struggling. The IVF process has been really hard on her. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The what? IVF, honey. You know, fertility treatments. She and James have been trying for a baby. It's expensive, and she's so fragile right now. We didn't want to upset her on her birthday. I stared at the dark room, the words echoing like static. They didn't come to their son-in-law's funeral because my sister was doing IVF. You skipped his funeral, I said slowly. Because Christy was worried about her eggs? Don't be vulgar, Mom snapped. We just had to keep her calm. Stress affects the process. I laughed then. Not a happy laugh, a broken, disbelieving sound that came from somewhere deep and hollow. You're unbelievable. Don't raise your voice at me, she said sharply. We're all grieving in our own way, and it's not fair to hold one mistake over our heads forever. One mistake? I whispered. You missed his funeral. You left me to bury him alone. Her tone hardened. We did what we thought was best. For everyone. Then she added, almost tenderly, you'll understand one day when you're a mother. I felt something inside me snap clean in half. Goodbye, Mom. After I hung up, I sat there in the dark until dawn crept through the windows. The house looked like a photograph, frozen, perfect, empty. I thought about the IVF, how my sister's journey to motherhood was already being used as a shield against accountability. And for a moment, I hated her. Not because she wanted a child, but because she'd never understand what it meant to lose everything and still be told to share. The next day, I went to the cemetery alone. The earth was still soft from the burial. 3 names carved into stone. Daniel Collins, beloved husband and son. I brushed the dirt from the lettering with my sleeve. The letters felt cold, real, final. I think I'm done, I whispered. Done chasing people who only love me when it's easy. A wind passed through the trees and I could almost hear him. Good. About time. When I got home, I found a message waiting on my phone from my father. Nina, your mother's upset. You shouldn't speak to her like that. You're not yourself. We understand you're grieving, but you need to think about your sister. She's trying to create life while you're holding on to death. Daniel wouldn't want you to be bitter. It ended with, call me when you've calmed down. I deleted it. For years, I'd believed their version of love was real. Conditional, complicated, painful. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't love. It was control disguised as concern. And Daniel, even in death, had given me something they never could. Permission to stop playing their game. A week later, I met with our lawyer, Mark Reynolds. He handed me the folder that would change everything. Wills, insurance, ownership documents. But it was the handwritten letter tucked inside that mattered most. Daniel's voice in ink. You've spent your whole life helping people who don't deserve it. This money isn't their lifeline, it's your freedom. Don't let them rewrite your grief into guilt. Build something that makes you proud to carry my name. I pressed the paper to my chest and whispered, I will. That was the moment I stopped grieving the man I lost and started honoring the woman he believed I could become. The first time I went to Mark Reynolds' office after the funeral, I felt like an imposter in my own life. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place Daniel used to call where real money lives. I walked through the revolving door in the same black dress I'd worn to the funeral, like I didn't deserve different clothes yet. The receptionist greeted me with that soft, careful voice people reserve for the newly broken. Mrs. Collins, Mark will be right with you. Can I get you coffee? Tea? No, thank you, I said, though my hands were already craving something to hold. Mark came out to meet me. Tall, silver hair, expensive suit, kind eyes. I'd only met him twice before, both times with Daniel. Back then, I'd tuned out most of the legal talk. Now I wished I'd listened to every word. Come on in, he said gently, guiding me to his office. Take your time. There's no rush. I sank into a leather chair that probably cost more than my first car. Across from me, his desk was covered in neat stacks of paper, each pile held together with a clip like a small, controlled storm. This isn't going to be easy, he said, sitting down. But Daniel was very thorough. He wanted to make sure you were protected. Protected. The word felt foreign. No one had ever structured protection around me before. I'd always been the one doing the shielding. I folded my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them tremble. Let's start with the basics, Yanni said, and opened the first folder. Your husband had an updated will, Mark said, sliding a signed document toward me. Everything personal goes to you, household items, vehicles, joint accounts. That part is straightforward. Straightforward. Nothing in my life felt straightforward. And the company? I asked. My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone else. Collins Contracting was structured as an LLC with Daniel as primary owner. He had a buy-sell agreement in place in case something happened, but since there's no surviving business partner, his shares transfer entirely to you. I blinked. So, what does that mean exactly? It means, he said gently, you now own his company. I laughed, a small, strange sound. I can't run a construction company, I said. I can barely run my dishwasher right now. I don't even know half of what he did. You don't have to decide anything today, Mark replied. We can put interim management in place. You can keep it, sell it, restructure it. For now, it exists. And it belongs to you. Belongs to you. The phrase landed with a weight I wasn't ready to carry. I nodded slowly. Okay, and the insurance? The hospital bills? The funeral? I was told there might be something. He gave me a small, almost proud smile, like he'd been waiting for this part. Yes, he said. There is something. He pulled another folder from the stack. This one was thicker. He opened it and turned it so I could see. Your husband had 3 life insurance policies, he said. 1 through the business, 1 private term policy, and 1 supplemental policy he took out on his own. Altogether, after taxes and administrative fees, you're looking at approximately $4 million. The words didn't compute at first. They floated there between us. Unreal. $4 million. I think you misplaced a decimal, I managed. I haven't, he said calmly. Daniel was diligent. Very strategic. He spread the policies between different providers. Paid monthly, never large lump sums. If you look here, he pointed at a ledger, neatly typed. Dates, premiums, policy numbers. He prepared for this, Nina. Not because he expected it, but because he understood risk. He wanted to know that if the worst happened, you wouldn't be at the mercy of anyone. Especially not your family. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arm of the chair to steady myself. He never told me. I whispered. Not the full extent, no, Mark said. He told me he didn't want you to worry about numbers, that he knew you'd try to talk him out of it. He also didn't want your parents to know. Of course he didn't. I stared at the rows of figures. $4 million. Enough to pay off the house 3 times. Enough to erase my parents' debts. Enough to fund every impulsive mess Christy could make for the next decade. He must have seen the storm in my face because he said, "There's more. I think it'll help." He reached into a side drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, the paper thick, my name written across the front in Daniel's handwriting. I recognized the way he wrote my N, taller than the rest of the letters, slightly slanted, like it was trying to stand guard. "He wrote this 3 years ago," Mark said quietly, after a meeting we had about revising his will. He called it insurance on the insurance. He asked me to give it to you only if he couldn't explain things himself. My vision blurred. "I'll leave you alone for a few minutes," Mark said, standing. "Take your time. When you're ready, we'll talk about practicalities." The door clicked softly behind him. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I opened it. The paper felt warm from my hands, like it had been waiting for me. I slid my finger under the seal and unfolded the letter. "Nina, if you're reading this, it means I failed at the one job I cared about most, staying alive to grow old with you. I am so sorry." The words blurred as my eyes filled. I wiped them away and kept reading. "You're probably sitting in Mark's office right now, overwhelmed and mad at me for keeping secrets, so let me explain. I've watched your family for 15 years. I've watched them drain you, guilt you, and convince you that your value lives in how much you can do for them. I love you too much to leave you at their mercy. That's why I set up these policies the way I did. One through the company, one through a private broker, one through a provider your parents would never think to ask about. I know how they think. If they smell money, they'll come circling like vultures talking about family and sharing and what's fair. When that happens, I need you to remember this. They didn't show up for you when it mattered. They don't get to show up now and collect." My hands tightened on the page. "You've spent your whole life helping people who didn't deserve it, bailing them out, covering for them, shrinking yourself so they could feel big. This money is not their second chance. It's your first. Don't give them your house. Don't pay off their debts. Don't fund their dreams. They made their choices. Now you get to make yours. Use what I left you to build something you can stand on. Something that doesn't require their approval. If you want to start a business, do it. If you want to work part-time and paint ugly landscapes and drink overpriced coffee, do that. If you want to create something bigger, something that helps people who actually need it, then you'll know how. You always have. Just please don't confuse obligation with love anymore. They're not the same. You don't owe your parents a retirement. You don't owe your sister infinite fresh starts. You don't owe anyone access to what we built together. You owe yourself peace." They skipped my funeral, Nina. Yes, I know. Mark will show you why I'm sure of that later. If they couldn't be bothered to show up when you needed them most, they don't deserve to benefit from the fact that I tried to take care of you. I trust you more than anyone I've ever known. Whatever you decide to do with this money, I know you'll make it matter. Just promise me one thing. Don't let guilt make this their legacy. Make it yours. I love you. Always. D. By the time I reached the end, my body was shaking, not from grief this time, but from something sharper. It was like he'd reached from beyond the grave and flicked on a light switch in a room I didn't know I was sitting in. He wasn't just leaving me money, he was leaving me permission. Mark knocked softly and stepped back in. "Do you want some water?" he asked. "No," I said, folding the letter carefully along its original creases. "I want you to tell me everything." So he did. We went through the policies line by line. Policy NAR 1, $2 million, business-backed, with a clause ensuring the company could stay afloat for at least a year. Policy NAR 2, $1.5 million, standard term, earmarked for mortgage, living expenses, and spouse well-being, as the form called it. Policy NAR 3, a smaller policy, $500,000, signed and dated right after the Christmas where my parents forgot to invite us to dinner because Christy was too depressed to deal with guests. He called this one the insurance on emotional damage, Mark said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was half joking, half not. Sounds like him, I murmured. We reviewed the company documents next: employee contracts, equipment leases, tax filings. He updated all of this regularly, Mark said. You should know, most people don't. He was unusually prepared. I glanced at the letter again. It wasn't just that he'd been prepared, he'd been preparing me. Mark, I said slowly, how much do my parents know? About the policies? Very little, I think. Daniel didn't want them involved. He once told me, if anything happens to me, they'll sniff around. Do not tell them numbers without Nina's permission. Of course he'd thought that far ahead. Of course he'd created a firewall between their greed and my survival. I exhaled slowly. So what now? I asked. I have money, apparently. A company I don't know how to run. Parents who think this is a community chest. What am I supposed to do with all of that? Mark leaned back, studying me, not as a victim, but as someone at the start of something. Honestly, he said, right now you do nothing you'll regret. You don't give away a cent out of guilt. You let the company run with temporary management. You sit with the reality that your life has changed in ways that are both horrific and strangely full of potential. I stared out of the window. Cars crawled by on the street below. People walked their dogs, checked their phones. Ordinary lives, untouched by drunk drivers and funerals and inheritance letters. Daniel mentioned something, Mark added. He said if you ever wanted to set up some kind of fund, charitable, impact-based, he'd left enough room in the financial structure for that. His exact words were, my wife has more compassion in one finger than most people do in their whole body. If anyone can turn tragedy into something useful, it's her. The words went straight through me. A fund, helping people who actually needed it, not the ones who simply expected it. The idea wasn't fully formed yet, just a shadow of something, but it felt right in a way nothing else had in weeks. Okay, I said, we're going to do this slowly, carefully. I'll keep living in the house for now. We'll stabilize the company. I'm not making any decisions about giving anything away yet. Including to your family? He asked gently. Especially to my family. He nodded. Good. That aligns with Daniel's wishes. I put the letter back in its envelope, tucked it into my bag, and stood. Thank you, I said. For not treating me like I'm made of glass. You are made of glass, he said, standing too. But tempered glass. You'll bend before you break. I almost smiled. On the drive home, the numbers spun in my head. 4 million, trucks, projects, invoices, policies, colliding with images of my parents' faces when they'd said, we can't just walk out on Christy's birthday. They hadn't shown up for me when I was at my lowest, but they would show up for this. The money, the company, the opportunity. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Let them, I thought. Let them come. This time, I wouldn't be begging for love. This time, I'd be holding the deed, the contracts, the checkbook. And thanks to Daniel, I'd finally have the one thing I'd never had with them before. A choice. 2 weeks after meeting with Mark, I started hearing from my family again, as if grief came with a timer, and mine had just expired. The first message came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in Daniel's office going through invoices I didn't understand when my phone lit up. Mom. Hi, sweetheart. We've been giving you space, but your father and I thought maybe it's time to talk. There are things that need sorting out. Love you. It sounded innocent enough, except in my family, things that need sorting out never meant emotional closure. It meant money. I didn't reply. The next day, she called, then called again. Then Dad called, then Christy. When I finally answered, it wasn't out of curiosity. It was out of exhaustion. Sweetheart, Mom began, her voice sugar-coated. We're so worried about you. You've been through so much. I said nothing. Silence has always made her nervous. Your father and I were talking, she continued, and we realized that Daniel must have left something behind. I mean, he had a successful company, right? There it was. The pivot. The reason for the call. Why do you want to know? I asked flatly. Well, it's not about the money, she said quickly. But family should be transparent. And we've been struggling. Between the house payments and Christie's treatments. Treatments? I repeated. Yes, the IVF. She's on her second cycle now. Poor thing, it's been so hard on her body. And insurance barely covers anything. I closed my eyes. There it was again, Christie's eternal performance, now wrapped in the sanctity of motherhood. The golden child reborn as a martyr with syringes? Mom kept talking, unaware that every word pushed me further away. She's been so depressed, Nina. The doctors say less stress helps. That's why your father and I are covering the expenses. We had to refinance the house again. Of course they did. Nina, Mom continued, you've always been so good with money. Maybe you could help her this time. You know, as a gesture of support. Daniel would want that. I almost laughed. Daniel, who'd written a letter warning me about this exact conversation, would definitely not want that. Mom, I said slowly, do you even hear yourself? You didn't come to his funeral. You haven't visited once. And now you're calling about fertility bills. Oh, don't be cruel, she said, her voice tightening. We were grieving too in our own way. No, Mom, I said. You were celebrating. Her voice went cold. You don't need to throw that in our faces forever. Forever hasn't even been 3 months, I snapped. There was a pause, long enough for me to picture her glaring at Dad, silently demanding he take over. Then his voice came on the line, deep, rehearsed, heavy with authority. Nina, he said, you need to stop talking to your mother that way. Do I? Yes, he said firmly. We understand you're in pain, but you've become difficult. This isn't the daughter we raised. No, I said softly, it isn't. You raised a doormat. I buried her with my husband. For a moment, there was silence. Then he said, you know, Christy told us you were becoming bitter. She's worried about you. Christy is worried about me, I said, disbelief cutting through my voice. That's rich. She just wants peace, Nina. She wants a family. You should be happy for her. I was alone in a church burying my husband, I said. And you think I should be happy for a woman who spent that day blowing out candles? She's trying to bring new life into the world, he countered. You're dwelling on death. That's not healthy. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Thanks, Dad. I'll bring that up with my therapist. Right after I write a check for Christy's womb. Nina, he said sternly, watch your tone. You skipped his funeral, I said. You don't get to police my tone. He exhaled sharply. The sound of a man realizing control was slipping through his fingers. Well, he said finally, if you're going to be selfish, that's your decision. But don't expect us to stand by you when the world turns its back. You already turned your back, I said, and hung up. The next day, Christy texted, Hey, sis, heard you talk to Mom and Dad. I know things are tense, but maybe we can meet for coffee? I really want to fix things between us. Fix things in Christy language meant get what I want without consequences. Still, I agreed. I wanted to see her face when I said no. We met at a cafe downtown, the kind with overpriced matcha and walls painted like Instagram backdrops. She looked polished, designer coat, manicured nails, not a trace of grief in her eyes. Nina, she said brightly, sliding into the seat across from me. You look amazing. I was so worried you'd gone full recluse. I did, I said. It's peaceful there. She laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. After some meaningless small talk about the weather, she leaned forward, lowering her voice to that faux confidential tone she used when manipulating sounded like concern. So, she said, Mom mentioned Daniel left something. Something, I echoed. Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't want to pry, but you know how things have been. Between the treatments and James losing hours at work and Mom and Dad's mortgage. Christy, I interrupted. Do you ever hear yourself? She blinked. What do you mean? I mean that every time life gets difficult, you make it everyone else's problem. And somehow you always come out untouched. She frowned, offended. That's not fair. No, I said. When Mom had surgery, who took unpaid leave to take care of her? Me. When you blew through your savings in Europe, who helped cover the credit card bills? Me. When Dad's business tanked, who lent them money? Me. And when my husband died, who showed up? Not you. She shifted in her seat, eyes darting around as if looking for a witness to her innocence. That's harsh, Nina. You know I had my own things going on. You were drinking champagne at a country club. Her eyes narrowed. God, you sound just like him. Like who? Daniel, she spat. Always so judgmental. Always acting like he was better than everyone. Maybe if he hadn't been working so much, he'd still be alive. The words hit like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She must have seen it in my face because she immediately softened her tone, placing a hand over mine. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying, life's short. We should help each other while we can. By help each other, you mean help you, I said, pulling my hand away. Nina, she said, wounded, I'm your sister. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, you're a stranger I happened to grow up with. She sat back, stunned. Wow, you've really changed. I hope so. When I got home, the house felt different. Not haunted, cleansed. Like every word I hadn't said before had finally burned through the walls and left them cleaner. But peace doesn't last long when people smell money. 3 days later, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize, robertwalkerlegaloutlook.com. That alone made me laugh. My father had apparently discovered email for threats. Subject, family discussion. Nina, we have been patient, but your behavior is unacceptable. As your father, I have a right to know what assets were left behind. Your mother and I are not well. Christy's health and emotional state are fragile. A reasonable daughter would help her family instead of hoarding wealth. If we do not hear from you by Friday, we will have no choice but to involve legal counsel. Dad. I stared at it for a long time, then forwarded it to Mark with one line. Can we file this under emotional extortion? His reply came 10 minutes later. Already ahead of you. Ignore them. Let's talk about your next steps instead. The next steps. I'd been floating between survival and paralysis for weeks, but now something sharper was forming beneath the surface. The more they pushed, the more focused I became. I started spending my mornings in Daniel's office, sorting through company files, learning how it worked. Contracts, equipment costs, employee records. It was like piecing together a blueprint of his mind. He'd built things for a living, tangible things. Maybe I could too. Mark came by one afternoon with coffee and updates. The insurance payments are finalized, he said. You'll see the deposits soon. We'll set up a trust for tax protection. Good, I said, because I know what I want to do. His eyebrows lifted. Already? I nodded. Daniel wanted me to build something that mattered. So I will. I told him about the idea that had been growing quietly in my head ever since I read the letter, a charitable foundation in Daniel's name. One that helped widows and families who'd lost someone to drunk driving, or to negligence, or to plain bad luck. Not endless handouts, real, structured aid. Grants, scholarships, rebuilding funds. Mark smiled. He'd be proud. I know, I said. And it'll be mine too, my work, my boundaries. Boundaries? Yes, I said. I'm tired of bleeding for people who only visit when they smell opportunity. He nodded. I'll help you file the paperwork. The following week, I sold my parents' mortgage. Quietly. They'd refinanced it so many times that the bank was practically giving it away. A few signatures, a wire transfer, and suddenly I wasn't just the daughter they ignored. I was their creditor. Mark looked uneasy when I told him. Are you sure about this, Nina? It's bold. They've taken enough, I said. It's time they pay rent to reality. He exhaled through his nose. Just make sure you know your end game. I do, I said. I'm not evicting them. I'm giving them an opportunity. An opportunity? Yes. They wanted my help. They'll get it. But on my terms. That night, I drafted the email. To Robert and Linda Walker, Christy Morrison. Subject, proposal for family collaboration. Dear family, since you've made your financial concerns clear, I'm offering a solution. I've recently acquired your mortgage. You no longer owe the bank. You owe me. You can stay in the house under one condition. You'll both work for the Collins Foundation, the nonprofit I'm establishing in Daniel's name. Positions: food distribution and community outreach. Compensation: minimum wage. Hours: 30 per week. Failure to comply will void your tenancy, and the property will be listed for sale. You wanted my help. Here it is. Nina, I hit send. Then I sat back in Daniel's chair, staring at the framed blueprint on the wall. The first house he ever built. The caption beneath it read, "Strong foundations start with good boundaries." I smiled. For the first time since the accident, I finally had both. The first time I said the name out loud, it felt strange on my tongue. The Collins Foundation. It didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like grace wearing armor. I'd spent weeks building it. The name, the mission, the structure. Each piece like a brick in something Daniel would have recognized. Solid, clean, unshakable. But beneath the polished surface, I knew what it really was. A reckoning. The paperwork went through faster than expected. Mark called one morning while I was drinking coffee by the window. It's official, he said. You're now the founder and CEO of the Collins Foundation. I stared out at the quiet street. For the first time in months, I felt something other than numbness. Not joy, not peace, control. What do you want it to be? He asked. Simple, I said. We help the ones who don't have anyone else. Specific how? Funeral costs, legal support, therapy grants, people who lost everything because someone was careless, like drunk driving, workplace accidents, insurance loopholes. He whistled softly. That's ambitious. Daniel was ambitious, I said. And he liked symmetry. He built homes. I'll rebuild lives. He laughed quietly. You sound like him when you talk about it. I know, I said, smiling into my coffee. That's the point. The first thing I did was hire 2 people, women I met in a grief support group. Both had lost their husbands in car crashes. Both had been treated by the world as if they'd expired alongside them. Lisa handled administration. Carla ran logistics. We worked out of Daniel's old office. His drafting table became the desk where we wrote grant checks. His whiteboard, once covered in blueprints, now held a list of names and case numbers. Every one of them had a story that started with tragedy and ended with silence. We were there to fill the space in between. At first, it was small. We paid for a widow's rent while her husband's insurance claim processed. We covered funeral costs for a family in Kansas. We sent therapy vouchers to a woman whose teenage son had been killed by a drunk driver 2 blocks from his home. Every time I signed a check, I thought of Daniel's letter. Use it to build something you can stand on. And I did. 3 weeks later, Mark came by with a manila envelope. Thought you'd want to see this, he said, handing it over. Inside were 3 notarized documents: the official transfer of the Walker property, the mortgage, the deed, the payment ledger. In other words, my parents' house now belonged to me. I'd expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt something quieter, inevitability, like gravity doing its job. Did they respond to your email? Mark asked. Oh, yes, I said. You could say that. Mom's reply had arrived at 2:17 a.m., written in all caps. Nina, what is wrong with you? How dare you threaten us with eviction? We are your parents, not your employees. You need help? You're having a breakdown. We're coming to talk in person. Dad's came 2 hours later, colder, shorter. This is beneath you. We raised you better than this. Oh, if you think you can humiliate us, think again. And Christy, of course, added her own sugar-coated poison. I know you're hurting, sis, but this is cruel. Mom's blood pressure spiked because of you. Can't we just talk like adults? I'm starting my third IVF cycle next month. Please don't make things worse for everyone. I didn't answer any of them. I simply sent a PDF of their employment contracts. They showed up anyway. It was a Thursday afternoon when I saw their car pull into the lot outside the foundation office. A white sedan, shiny but overdue for an oil change, like its owners. Through the glass, I saw Mom's figure first. Pastel sweater, pearl earrings, the uniform of respectability. Christy followed in oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf that looked rehearsed. Dad trailed behind, jaw clenched, carrying a folder of papers, as if bureaucracy could still save him. Lisa looked up from her desk. Should I? No, I said. Let them in. They entered like royalty in exile. Nina, Mom began, arms already open for a hug I didn't return. We need to talk. I sent everything in writing, I said. She blinked. You can't be serious. That email was a joke, right? No joke, I said. You're employees now, if you accept. Employees? Dad snapped. We're your family. Family that skipped my husband's funeral, I said calmly. So, yes, employees sounds about right. Christy scoffed. This is insane. You can't just buy people's homes and force them to work for you. I didn't force you, I said. I offered you a choice. Keep the house or find somewhere else to live. I imagine rentals are hard to come by when you've refinanced 4 times. The silence that followed was delicious. Mom recovered first. Sweetheart, she said, using the voice that used to melt me as a child. We know you're still grieving, but this is vindictive. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's accountability. Dad stepped forward. You think this makes you powerful? You're humiliating yourself. No, Dad, I said, standing. I'm humbling you. There's a difference. Christy folded her arms. You've lost it. All this money's gone to your head. Funny, I said. That's exactly what people said about you after your second business venture. Her cheeks flushed. You're pathetic. And you're unemployed, I said, sliding 2 papers across the desk. Here's your contract. If you'd rather not take it, you can vacate the house by the end of next month. Mom's voice trembled. We're not going anywhere. Then welcome to the Collins Foundation, I said. Orientation is Monday. They showed up. Of course they did. When you've built your life on other people's generosity, you'll crawl through fire to keep it. I assigned them to the Food Distribution Center, a converted warehouse where volunteers sorted boxes of groceries for low-income families. Every Monday, Mom handed out bags of rice and canned soup to strangers who thanked her without knowing she was working off her own debt. Dad unloaded pallets, his posture stiff, his jaw permanently locked in a scowl. Christy refused at first. She lasted 1 day before realizing the alternative was homelessness. Her job was at the front desk logging donations. The irony wasn't lost on me. The golden child counting other people's charity dollars. Lisa pulled me aside after the first week. You sure you're okay with this? She asked. It's how about unusual, mixing family and work. I'm not mixing anything, I said. They're finally earning what they took. The transformation was subtle but steady. Neighbors stopped dropping by my parents' house when word spread that they worked for the foundation. Mom avoided her social club entirely. Dad's golf buddies stopped returning calls. And Christy found out what real exhaustion felt like. Her manicured hands blistered from unpacking boxes. Her designer clothes gave way to jeans and t-shirts. She started showing up late, eyes puffy, voice flat. At first, I thought she was faking humility. But one morning, I walked into the distribution center and found her sitting alone between stacks of boxes, crying quietly. "Christy?" I asked. She looked up, startled, wiping her eyes fast. "I'm fine." "What's wrong?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I don't think the IVF worked again." For a moment, something softened in me, a reflex I hadn't killed yet. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. She nodded, sniffed, and tried to smile. "It's okay. Maybe it's not meant to be." I wanted to believe she meant it, but the next day she posted a photo online. "Still hopeful IVF journey, faith over fear." The performance was back. The sincerity gone. I stopped feeling guilty. 6 months passed. The foundation grew faster than I imagined. Donations poured in from companies Daniel had once worked with. Local papers ran stories about our outreach. "Widow turns tragedy into purpose." That was one headline. I didn't correct them. Mark called it revenge in heels. I called it balance. Because every time I saw my parents loading food boxes, I thought about every time they'd told me to be the bigger person. And every time Christy smiled at a homeless mother holding a child, I thought about the day she said, maybe if he hadn't been working so much, he'd still be alive. Poetic justice isn't loud, it's patient. One evening, I stayed late at the office, going through thank you letters from families we'd helped. Lisa had left early. The building was quiet. I turned off my laptop and looked around. Daniel's drafting table still stood by the window, sunlight fading across the wood. His measuring tape, his pens, his old coffee mug. I touched the mug and whispered, "You'd like this, wouldn't you?" The next morning, we received an envelope addressed to Mrs. Collins, personal. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Nina, I've been volunteering at your foundation for 4 months. My husband was killed by a drunk driver last year, leaving me with 3 kids and no savings. You paid for our rent and groceries when no one else would. Yesterday, I got a job because of the referral your team sent. You saved my life. Thank you. Maria Alvarez." I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in Daniel's mug, and whispered, "We did it, love. We're building something that matters." That same week, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual polish. "Nina," she said, "we've been thinking." "That must be exhausting," I said dryly. "Please," she whispered. "Listen, your father's health isn't good. He's tired all the time. We can't keep doing this." "You mean working?" "Yes." "Then sell the house," I said. "You'll have enough to retire somewhere smaller." She hesitated. "It doesn't feel like ours anymore." "It's not," I said. "It never was. You mortgaged it for Christie's dreams long before I bought it." Her breath hitched. Then softly, "You've changed." "I had to," I said. "You made sure of it." That night, I walked through the foundation's hall, past the shelves of food, the framed photos of families we'd helped, the staff laughing over paperwork. It was quiet, purposeful, alive. And it hit me that revenge and healing weren't opposites. They were twins, born from the same fire, just walking in different directions. I'd built a life where every dollar my family once tried to steal was now feeding someone else. And somehow that felt more satisfying than any courtroom victory ever could. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need them to suffer. I just needed them to work for good. 6 months after the Collins Foundation went public, success stopped being quiet. The Sunday edition of the Herald carried a feature titled, "From Widow to Warrior: How Nina Collins is Rebuilding Hope." There I was on the front page, standing in the foundation's warehouse, light falling through the high windows, a calm smile that looked steadier than I felt. The article called me the woman who turned loss into lifelines. By noon, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, donors, volunteers. Lisa cried at her desk. Daniel would be so proud. She kept saying, he would have been. But I also knew who else was reading that article over breakfast. My parents. They waited 48 hours to make contact, as if pretending to be restrained made them sound more dignified. Then the messages began. Mom first. We just saw the paper. You were wonderful. Everyone's talking about you. We're so proud, sweetheart. Then another. It's so inspiring what you're doing. We always knew you'd do something meaningful. Maybe your father and I could help somehow, join the board. Just family pride. Family pride. The same family that once told me charity work was a hobby for bored wives. I didn't respond. So Dad tried his turn. You've proven yourself, Nina. But it's time to think bigger. Foundations need strong leadership. I could bring that. I stared at the screen. Leadership from the man who couldn't lead his car out of a driveway without blaming the neighbors. I left the messages unread. Christy chose the stage she knew best, social media. She posted a photo of herself in front of the foundation sign, smiling like an unpaid brand ambassador. So proud of my sister Nina. The Collins Foundation is changing lives. Our family has always believed in helping others. Our family. That was almost performance art. Lisa showed me the post over lunch. You want me to comment something shady? She teased. I smiled. No, give them time. Audiences change. By evening, the audience had indeed changed. Didn't you skip your brother-in-law's funeral? Funny how you always believed in helping others only after the press showed up. Minimum wage must be hard work, huh? The post vanished within hours, but the screenshot stayed, floating across the internet like little ghosts. 3 days later, it blew up for real. A young volunteer leaked the story, documents, testimony, everything, to a journalist who thrived on moral drama. The headline hit Tuesday morning, "The Family That Abandoned Her," inside the real story behind the Collins Foundation. The piece was clean, cold, precise. It told everything. How my parents had skipped Daniel's funeral to attend Christy's birthday, how they hadn't called once during those first weeks, how I'd later bought their mortgage and given them jobs at the foundation. Neighbors were quoted. Even Mrs. Patterson from across the street said, I saw it myself. That poor woman stood alone by her husband's coffin. The article ended with, sometimes justice isn't revenge or forgiveness. It's living well enough that the truth becomes undeniable. Perfect. The calls began before breakfast. Mark rang first. You didn't leak it, did you? No, I said. Then whoever did gave you a gift. Brace yourself, they'll panic. He was right. By noon, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Mom, Dad, Christy, unknown numbers, even a lawyer I'd never heard of. I ignored them all. At 2 p.m., Lisa appeared in my doorway. They're here, she whispered. Who? She tilted her head toward the window. Outside stood my parents and Christy, surrounded by reporters, microphones, flashing cameras. The same people who'd ignored my grief were now desperate to film it. Dad was speaking angrily, Mom weeping for effect. Christy, oversized sunglasses and perfect hair, hovered behind them. Lisa asked, should I call security? No, I said, standing. Let's give them an audience. When I stepped outside, the press swarmed. Nina, is it true your family didn't attend your husband's funeral? Nina, why did you make them work for you? Nina, can there be forgiveness after this? I smiled, calm and even. My foundation speaks for itself, I said. We help people who've been abandoned. Then I turned to my parents. They froze under the cameras. Mom, Dad, I said clearly, If you want to discuss employment matters, schedule a meeting through HR. I don't do press conferences in parking lots. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. I turned and walked back inside. Someone shouted behind me, "Do you still consider them family?" I didn't answer. Silence, for once, was mercy. That evening, the clip ran on every channel. Charity founder faces her family. They played it over and over, my composed smile, my father's stunned face, my mother's shaking hand clutching a tissue she didn't need. Christy pretending the sunglasses hid her humiliation. I didn't feel joy. I felt balance. The scales evening out. Mark called again that night. "You handled it flawlessly," he said. "No bitterness, no spectacle. People love a calm heroine." "I don't want to be a heroine," I said. "I just wanted them to stop rewriting my story." "Then you've succeeded," he said. "Completely." The next morning, an unmarked envelope was slipped under the foundation's glass door. No return address, just Nina and my father's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "We've lost everything. The church asked us to resign. Christy's husband left her. People whisper when we go out. Are you happy now? Dad?" I folded the note carefully and placed it in the same drawer where Daniel's letter lived. Then I whispered, "No, just finished." 2 weeks later, the storm passed. The internet moved on, new scandals, new saints. But donations doubled. The foundation grew faster than I could track. We opened 2 more branches, added a legal aid unit, expanded to neighboring counties. Our tagline, "Rebuilding lives, one act of grace at a time," started appearing on bus stops. One afternoon, as we were packing care boxes, a young mother approached me. She'd lost her husband in a warehouse accident, left with 2 toddlers and a stack of bills. We'd paid her rent for 3 months and found her part-time work. Tears streaked her face as she hugged me. "You saved me," she whispered. "You and Daniel. You gave me my life back." I smiled. "You saved yourself. We just handed you a hammer." That night, I found a small envelope on my desk. No stamp, no return name. Inside was a single folded note written in shaky handwriting. "Nina, I'm sorry. Not for losing the house or the job or the reputation. For that night, for the party, the champagne, the way I told myself your tragedy would ruin my birthday. You were right. I was selfish. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I finally understand what I took from you. Christy." I sat still for a long time, the words blurring in the lamplight. Then I took a clean sheet of paper and wrote, "Christy, I believe you mean it. But believing doesn't mean reopening the door. Some bridges burn clean, and that's how they're meant to stay. Take care of yourself. N." I mailed it the next morning. No return address. Spring came early that year. Our first foundation gala sold out weeks in advance. Mark insisted I attend. "You have to let people see what they're supporting," he said. So I went. The ballroom shimmered with warm light, banners reading the Collins Foundation, rebuilding lives. There were donors, volunteers, families we'd helped. Everywhere I turned, there were smiles that looked real. Halfway through dinner, a woman approached with a small boy clutching her hand. "You don't remember us," she said softly. "You paid for my husband's therapy after his crash. He's home now, working again. My son wanted to thank you." The boy handed me a folded paper crane. "It's for your husband," he whispered. "Mom says he's the reason we have ours." I knelt to his level, tears rising fast. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." When they left, I stepped out onto the terrace for air. The city glowed beneath a sky washed clean by rain. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by silence. I felt Daniel there. Not as memory, but as presence. The next morning, I visited the cemetery. Fresh flowers, cool breeze, sunlight across the stone. "I think we did it," I said quietly. "They can't hurt me anymore." And somehow, without meaning to, they helped build something good. A gust of wind moved through the trees. Steady, approving. Before leaving, I pulled an envelope from my bag. It was addressed to the local hospital's fertility clinic. Inside was a check for $50,000, anonymous, unrestricted funding for low-income couples seeking IVF. The memo line read simply, "For hope." Because even selfish people suffer. And the only way to end the cycle was to refuse to mirror their cruelty. I slid the envelope into the outgoing mail drop on my way home. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop at Daniel's old desk. A blank document blinked on the screen. The Collins Foundation. Future projects under it, I typed. Scholarships for spouses of accident victims. Grants for children who lost parents to drunk driving. Job programs for survivors rebuilding their lives. And beneath those, one final line, quiet, private. Peace. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and leaned back. Outside, the night was alive. Traffic, wind, distant laughter, ordinary life. And for the first time since the accident, it no longer hurt to live it.